All right, I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Fennell?
Here.
Mr. Frazier?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Here.
Mr. Marmee?
Present.
Mr. Rath?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Bug?
Here.
And Mr. Cox?
Here. We have 9 here this evening. Please rise for the invocation by Mr. Blake, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And take your hat off. Thank you.
Let us pray. Lord God, during this holiest of weeks, we want to thank you for these blessings. Wash over us with your love, your caring. Wash over this city. Wash over this community as we have one love for each other. Thank you, Lord, for giving us your Son, who we celebrate. For those in this diverse community of religion, we thank you for everything. Give us the grace to endure our troubles and reveal the guidance to go to the light. In all these things we say, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Blake. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have caucus. That's the time for council to discuss anything pertaining to the agenda tonight. Do we have anything?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee?
I make a motion to excuse Mr. Labutus. Second.
Motion to excuse Mr. Labutus, second by Mr. Frazier. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. That passes. Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Do we have anything else?
Mr. President, I will abstain, and I'm looking for the ordinance regarding the sewer project. I'm sorry, Resolution 1925.
1925? Thank you, Mr. Blake. Anyone have anything else? Next on the agenda, we have the minutes of our April 1st, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion to approve those?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Frazier.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lang. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have 3 reports this evening from standing committees, one from finance, one from service, and one from safety. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have 2 reports this evening from city officials. One from our city auditor, Stephen Johnson, our operating report for the period ending March 31st, 2019, and one from our city tax administrator, Barb Jobs, the income tax revenue report for a period ending March 31st, 2019. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have 3 communications this evening, all from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. One is for a new application for Weathervane Playhouse, one is for a renewal of 31 West, and one is for a name change on the River Road Coffee House. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Next on the agenda is comments from citizens. There are 2 places for comments from citizens. One is now and one is after the legislation. This is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. If anyone would like to speak in this first section, please raise your hand and we'll call you up here in an orderly manner. Okay? Let's start with this young lady right here. You'll just give us your name and address for the record.
My name's Helena Stevenson, 114 South 2nd Street, Newark.
And ma'am, you'll have to try to speak very loud if you would.
Well, I'm with the Newark Think Tank on Poverty, and we wanted to address housing tonight. I wanted to tell the brief story of Steph, who lives on the South End. Steph is a single mother, and her children have lived on the South End since 2010, after moving back to her native Newark from North Carolina. The South End has never been visually enticing, especially to those driving through. But when Steph was growing up, her neighbors on the South End were family. Desiree Blake organized block parties, and the real mayor of the South End, Skip Miller, looked out for everyone. Steph's weekly allowance went to the South End carryout, and Mound City Little League was the only Little League that had no fees to play, which was great considering Steph's mom was a single parent of 3 in a nursing school paying her tuition out of her own pocket at the time. Steph lived in one house off of South 2nd Street from 2010 to 2014. However, due to slumlord conditions, began looking for options to move. The house next door actually became available after the tenant died in the bathtub and the other overdosed on the kitchen floor. To a person in a better financial situation, they would have passed on the house, but Steph saw an opportunity for her kids to have a fenced-in yard. Plus, the landlord took better care of that property than other landlords on the South End. Steph may have been poor at that time, but by 2016, Steph was consulting NGOs in Germany, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Lithuania. In February of 2016, Steph was named one of 6 women in the world as a female role model in human rights. Steph was invited to speak in front of the United Nations in Switzerland regarding education and socioeconomics. She went on to publish 2 books and organize congressional briefings in D.C. You have never heard of Steph because Newark does not champion people in her kind of work. Despite Steph's career success, she did not move out of the South End. Even when her colleagues and friends began visiting from Germany, the UK, California, and D.C., and told her she should move out of such a depressing area, Steph would explain that she needed to stay on the South End because she cared about the South End and the people who resided there. Ultimately, Steph would regret that decision. On April 2nd, 2018, Steph was diagnosed with stage 1 ovarian and stage 2B cervical cancer. Steph continued coaching baseball at Mound City Little League until she was too sick. Steph kept her condition a secret. Stage 1 ovarian is beatable, but stage 2B cervical made Steph's cancer inoperable. Steph consulted with oncologists at the James Cancer Center and the Cleveland Clinic, both in the top of their field, and the James is the #1 cancer center in the world regarding cervical cancer. Both the James and the Cleveland Clinic concluded that Steph's cervical cancer should not have grown as fast as it did. The average age for stage 2B was 49 years old. Steph was 29. Cervical cancer cells take 10 years to turn into cancer. Steph's did in less than 4. Both the James and the Cleveland Clinic determined it was due to environmental factors. The Electra building across the street has zinc. Steph was given a 56% chance of survival. Steph began selling her furniture, her clothing, handbags. She knew treatment would be expensive. She quit her jobs and her side jobs, hoping to qualify for Medicaid by the time radiation and chemo began in July. Steph went on full disability, which was $752 a month at that time. Her rent was $600. Leeds was able to get her electric and gas down to $114 a month. However, 114 times 2 equals 228, which is greater than the 152 Steph had left after paying rent. Steph turned off her cable and internet, which saved her $119 a month, switched her cell phone carrier to a prepaid, and that saved her $35 a month. Steph applied for food stamps and was approved for $37 a month. I think we can all be jealous of the steak and lobster she can buy with that. So even after her radiation and chemo treatments at the James, she would go sit or stand in food pantry lines because no family of 3 can survive on $37 a month for food. Steph was eventually approved for Medicaid. Great, because chemo treatments were between $27,000 and $33,000 apiece. She had to do 5. Steph ultimately lost her car to repossession. She could have transferred her treatment to Licking Memorial, but Newark, a city of almost 50,000 people, does not have a sufficient public transportation system, deemed as not necessary by individuals in city positions who drive down 161 to get to work at the city building. Steph's predicament is made unbearable by people who don't live in Newark but get to make decisions about Newark. In December 2018, a letter addressed to Steph's landlord came in. Steph researched the LLC the letter came from in Columbus. The LLC wholesales houses. Steph confronted her landlord. Her landlord has always been good to her, and even during this conversation was honest. This is just business. Another landlord unloaded multiple properties with this LLC, and they were looking into doing the same. Steph is given an ultimatum: either buy her house at the inflated price the LLC is offering or move. Where is Steph supposed to move? The point of this story, I am asking for this council and mayor to stop lying to the people of Newark. You are responsible for many already and responsible for pending individuals on the South End being displaced. The downtown revitalization was never intended for the residents who live closest. We knew those shops were not meant for us. I knew when Little Bear went down in a parking lot in its place, we were about to be gentrified. Part of the South End is up for community reinvestment. Let's be honest, the majority of the South End are renters and not homeowners. Our landlords are about to make a great profit off of their multiple homes they own in the South End, most in deplorable condition. Because no one in Newark government would hold our landlords accountable for the conditions of our homes, we became a distressed area. The South End has never been a zoned area for commercial property. I assume the CRA is changing that stance, and that is why LLCs are coming in and purchasing as many properties as they can to wait on the offers that developers are going to make. I don't need confirmation from this council. I am Steph. I am educated, and I happen to be working on obtaining my real estate license, so I understand this process better than some of my neighbors. I recently walked the South End despite my deteriorating hip ligaments from massive amounts of radiation. My neighbors comprehend what is going on. Council and the mayor have underestimated the South End. 147. 147 is the number of votes to flip a council seat. 80%. 80% is the percentage of potential voters not registered on the South End. Only half of that is needed to flip the mayor's election. Homeless people can vote. We may want to stop condoning the bulldozing of their camps. Where you live should not determine whether you live or die. Unfortunately, in Newark, it does. There was a study released that the South End, residents of the South End, have a shorter lifespan. Stop displacing our people, clean up the South End with current resident involvement, bring in programs for renters to buy their homes, hold landlords accountable for the conditions on the South End. Paradise for the rich in Licking County should not come from the dignity of the poor. By the way, I did beat cancer, and I will be buying my house, and I am coming for Ward 1 in 2021.
Ma'am? You want to go next? Yeah.
My name is Donna Gibson, 1100 Thornwood Drive. I would just like to state that we want housing first for Newark. We have a lot of people who are homeless and have nowhere to go. And now we're facing a very serious crisis in Newark, and I'm working with a lot of those people. So we want a city-sanctioned encampment immediately. We need people to be placed where they're safe. We demand a tent city that has, at the very least, services or people who can help with services in one area so that people can go from a tent to an actual bed, which is what we always say. Thank you.
Did one of you two want to speak next? Ma'am?
My name is Emily Johnston, and currently I'm staying at the America's Best Inn in Hebron. My homelessness is due to unfortunate circumstances, and right now I didn't realize how bad it was here until I had to come here myself. And these encampments that they're talking about, fortunately right now I have a hotel room for the week. But once that week is up, if I do not find work by the end of that, I may have nowhere to go. So to have something like that would be easier on my life, to know that there's at least somewhere for me to go if I don't have a place to go. So that's what I'd like everybody to know.
Who else over here on this side wanted to speak? If you put your hand up. Okay, you two and you. Okay, and then we'll go over this side here as soon as these three are done.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tanya Cooper. I live at 260 North 5th Street in Newark, Ohio. I'm here about our current situation with our homeless population. We want housing for these people. We deal with them every day at the North Think Tank on Poverty, and the stories will float you away. It is time we do something. We can't keep putting people in the street. We're seeing babies being put out of their homes every single day. And it's easy to say go to Metropolitan. But I know of a case right now where the person went to Metropolitan, was qualified, got a voucher, but there was no housing for this family. So they're about to be homeless too. And I think it's time that we have drinking water available to these people. Last summer I dealt with many people that couldn't get a drink of water downtown because of the spigots were off, or the restaurants wouldn't let them in because they were homeless, or they were drug addicted. It's time that stops, and they need a place to bathe. River's not a place for them to bathe, but I see many of it. But the places that are available, there are certain regulations that they can't even walk through the door. If they have a sex offense, you can't walk through the door. If you have domestic violence, you can't go to the housing shelters. They won't let you in. So what are they supposed to do? We treat our animals better than we do these people. You would find somebody if they left their dog outside in inclement weather with no water. But where do the homeless get their, where do they get a fine? Who do they get a fine? Who can they ask for help if we don't stand up and do it? And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Gentlemen in the green shirt. You. Dan shirt. Pick a color.
I prepared a statement to read so I wouldn't forget anything. My name is Mitchell Bowden. I currently live at Terrace Gardens, 85 West Church Street. I've been a citizen in Newark for 12 years, and I've gotten pretty involved with the community and different organizations. I'm a member of the Freedom School, Licking County Computer Society, Newark Take on Poverty. Did I say Computer Society? I did. What else? Freedom School. The Licking County Progressives, and a couple other things. But anyway, I've lived at Terrace Garden for 3 years, and it's public housing owned by LMHA, which is the only building they own, but it's a nice one. And I've chosen to stay there the rest of my life, if I can. I came here tonight to speak on behalf of the homeless, because I have a great affinity for the homeless, a lot of empathy. I've been homeless myself twice. Once about 12 years ago, it was actually longer than that, maybe 15 years ago. It was the late 1990s, and I was homeless for about 8 months or so. I ended up getting a job there in Columbus driving a taxi cab, but because I had no place to stay, I ended up living out of the cab. I had a military box that I had my clothes changed in the back of the trunk. I slept in the back seat, usually would pull into a motel parking lot and sleep in the cab and then wake up and go to work. And that's how I supported myself. No place to go except the cab to live, or, to sleep out of, but it was a way of surviving. I was also homeless here in Newark back in 2015 for the whole year. Poor, no income, no way to get a job. And thank God I got St. Vincent de Paul Society to take me in their Haven shelter. And they helped me in many ways. So did the main place to get back on my feet again. I got case management with both of those places. Case management also with Licking County Coalition for Housing. And all these people, kind of got together, worked together to help me get back on my feet again. And I eventually was approved for disability income. And that's how I'm living at Terrace Gardens now. I live on $700 a month, which I know you guys would think would be almost impossible, but it is possible. I live very well, actually, on $700 a month because I watch my finances. As you should know, and you probably do, the two main homeless shelters here in this city simply cannot meet the homelessness needs that exist here. Not only because they do not have enough beds, but also because they have some very strict requirements to get in. And to stay there, you have to do certain things, and they demand that you do those things. And if you don't, or if you've got a problem with drugs and you end up getting high or drunk, they're going to kick you out, and you're going to be homeless again. So even though the shelters are there, they don't quite fit the need that we have. Some also have needs that the shelters themselves are simply not designed to assist them with. Sometimes homelessness affects entire families. And as my friend Daniel Crawford, who I'm not sure is here tonight or not, he was here. No? Okay.
His grandmother passed away. I think he probably will not be here tonight.
Who, Crawford?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll have to contact him later. But anyway, he testified here to you that affected him. He was homeless when he was a child. His whole family was. And I liked that. I watched that video. It was really nice. So anyway, you see the shelters are not designed to handle entire families. They're mostly for individuals. And we've got a lot of homeless families in our community that there's no place for them to go. Now, since somebody here at the city level made a decision to bulldoze the few homeless camps that existed around town, I come to you tonight with a few serious questions and also one serious request. The questions are these. Who made the decision to bulldoze the homeless camps recently? Was it yourselves? And if so, when was this decision made? So that was my number one question, because I know that my friend Everett over there records almost all your meetings. And if you made a decision to do that, I'd like to view that video and see who was for it, who was against it, and all that. If it was not you, then who was it? Did they have the authority to do so? How did the bulldozer guy get paid? I'm sure there were police officers there too who had the authority to tell the police to be there, to supervise the whole thing. Somebody has to be in a position of authority to do something like that, and I want to know who that was. And I think a lot of us here want to know who that was. Who made that decision? And And we're not going to stop asking until we get an answer that's satisfactory. I've heard that the railroad company got blamed for, but people have contacted them. They said they knew nothing about it. So lastly, my request for you is this. Please do something to help the homeless population in our city. Bulldozing their campsites at the grade is not going to fix the problem and is instead almost guaranteed to make things worse than they were before. Instead of tearing things down and hurting these people, you should be thinking instead about creating something new that will actually help them. Take one of the vacant properties that you own around town, there's a lot of them, and build them a new campsite, a new one. Something that has porta potties in it. If you are worried about the sight of the thing, put a fence around the damn thing. Put a big trash dumpster there, for whatever waste might be created. Better yet, build a toiletry building, like they have at different parks, on the lot where people can go to the bathroom and shave and take a shower. Put a swing set there, and some of those little springy horsey things that kids can play on, where homeless families who have children can live there in a tent and have a place for their kids to play. And build a nice indoor shelter house there, like they have at many parks, where people who live there can get together and talk and help each other out. A place where churches and counselors can meet with those people who live there and provide meals for them. Like St. Vincent, the churches bring meals in there all the time, and other help that they might need. Put a sink and stove in the building, so they can cook their own meals once or twice a week. Homelessness is a serious problem all across our nation. It's not just here. And it's not going to go away if we simply ignore it or punish the poor people who are already suffering as it is. Many other cities across our nation have taken positive steps to address this issue and to actually help their poor citizens who are in need. So why can't we? Let's build our people a new campground to replace the ones that we tore down, and let's make it a really good one. It may not be the final solution that fixes everything, but it wouldn't cost us that much, and I personally think it would help make a good start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else is there someone else on this side had their hand up? Wait a minute, stop. Ma'am, come on up. But you're not going to speak?
I am going to speak after her.
If you're going to speak, come up and speak.
Kelly, come after me.
Okay.
All right.
Anyone else on this side besides the young lady here? You too? Okay.
Yes, hi, my name is Leisha Farias. I'm at 116 Smithview Drive in Heath. I'm with the Newark Think Tank on Poverty, and we are here to ask for housing first for Newark so that people can get rapid permanent housing, but we know that's a longer-term solution. Right now, with facing this crisis of homelessness in the community, we demand a city-sanctioned encampment immediately, and we demand one where people can have access to the services that they need, including food. And at the end of this meeting, we would like to meet with Mr. Rhodes as Services Director. He's been an honorable man working with us who responded to our request to repair the water fountains last summer during the heat wave. I would be willing to work with Mr. Rhodes to schedule this meeting. We would like that to be with him, other city officials, and other local grassroots groups who also are demanding this city-sanctioned tent city. Thank you.
Sure, you want to come on? Slide on out too and sit up here, and we'll have you next. And that's everybody on this side, right? Okay. Ma'am.
First of all, I would like to say good evening to everybody, and I'm pleased to be out here. And my main concern is housing.
Give us your name and address, please.
Oh, my name is Callie Rucker, and I reside at 130 Delmar Avenue.
Thank you.
From what I experience and what I see, there's a lot of homeless in the city of Newark. Seem like our public service turn their head the other way, and that's not a good thing. The only time that we see the public service coming out when there's election time, they tell you they're going to do all these things, and when they get, excuse me, elected in, they don't want to be bothered. Excuse me. And I have approached someone that's running for public service. They didn't know who I was, and the treatment that I got, I wouldn't vote for them, but they were the last person. Finish the sentence. Also, by working with the Newark Think Tank on Poverty, the drug is an epidemic going on here. And Ohio was a leading overdose with the drugs, and I think Virginia got them beat. We have a lot of kids that's homeless in the city of Newark, and we cannot turn our backs on them because our kids is our future. We have to start talking to them and not at them, and include them in our circle. We have kids that's committing suicide. We have kids that are afraid to go to school because the school's not safe. We have kids that go to bed hungry at night because they don't have anything to eat and a place to stay. I talk to a lot of teachers that's in education because that's one of my dear things that's close to my heart. They tell me that a lot of kids don't have any place to live at during the weekend, and the only time they get something to eat is when they come back to school that following Monday. And I'm asking all of you all to just take a ride around the city of Newark and see what you come up with. The houses are falling down, and you ask yourself, would you want to live like that? And I always tell people, before you start talking and putting people down, have a perfect family and know who's in your family tree, because a lot of times you are misleading and you are being mean to the ones that you don't even notice in your family tree. Sometimes you have people in your family tree that you laugh at and talk about and don't even know that they're there until something happens. So if you all had to go homeless and go through a lot of ways these people getting treated, ask yourself that we are American citizens. We should be better than that. We should be better. When you go to bed at night, think about the people that's homeless. There's any different reason why people be homeless. I get this all the time. People say, why are they homeless? Well, let there be a flood, tornado, or any kind of thing that's going on. There could be a sickness. You become homeless. A lot of times the bills are so high until you cannot afford to pay the bills. And I think now, before people start pointing our fingers at somebody, turn around and take a good look at yourself and start doing what we voted you on to do. So on that note, everybody have a good evening, and I'm finished now.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Dustin Toller. I live at 105 West National Drive. I'm disabled. I've been homeless twice in Licking County. It's a big issue. The city council does need to do something to address this issue. You got people that are committing crimes just to get off the street and get 3 meals. Go in there just to have one place to sleep at night because you guys are mowing down their camps. People really need help. The city has the power to set programs in place to help these people. You guys have the power to give these people a place to stay and a place to educate, a place to grow and make something of themselves instead of just being homeless and being pushed around. You got homeless people breaking into empty homes. They're just trying to find one place to stay for a night. And then you got people that are squatting in these homes. You got a lot of rundown homes in Newark. A lot of these issues need to be addressed. I feel that the city has the power to address these issues, to help the people get off the streets. You guys can set a program in place just to push these people along and help them. Some of them are drug addicted. Some of them they have no ambition. The city can help people get ambition. I really believe that you guys have the power to do that. Every one of you guys can help with this issue. Homelessness is a serious problem in this area. I live in a low-income home because I'm on Social Security. I see homelessness everywhere around my house. The river, there's people back there sleeping in the woods by the river because they have no place to go. They have no family. I believe that the city could really help these people out. I think that you guys should set something in place just to help them. And I thank you guys for your time. That's all I have.
Thank you. People we have on this side who would like to speak, please raise your hand. Just one? Okay. Sir?
My name is Kellen Patey, and I'm living at 3 Scheffler Street off of Buena Vista. And I'm here tonight with the think tank, and I'm just here to say that my friends and fellow community members have spoken about their vision for emergency housing that we so desperately need. It's a vision that is supportive, it's sanitary, it's welcoming, and it's convenient. I'm up here also to say that it's safe. That's our vision. safe emergency housing for the homeless. And I want to see citizens trust law enforcement and city government in this city, and I want to see law enforcement and city government trust their citizens. In a city-sanctioned tent city, we need a law enforcement presence that's not just there to contain the homeless, to keep them out of sight, but to make the homeless people feel safe in the community and feel safe from one another. And that's going to better situate everyone that's living there, everyone that's taking advantage of that city resource, to re-enter society and continue to work toward their goals of independent living, of housing, of finding employment. But that needs to start with comfort, with trust, and I think perhaps with a new tone in law enforcement relationship with homeless people, and a new level of trust between citizens and the people who are working to keep them safe. So that's my addition. Thank you for listening to us tonight.
Thank you. On your side, you want to speak? Okay. There's one other opportunity after the legislation, so you go ahead now. And
My
we'll
name
move
is
on to our
Tina
legislation.
My name is Tina Osborne. I live at 1643 Churchill Downs Road, Apartment B, Newark, 43055. On behalf of for the housing, it is very hard. I have been homeless once. Not a good feeling. And when you do have like felons and other things to stop you, where are you supposed to go? And that's when the crime comes in, to get somewhere to go. So I really would hope you guys can push to have something for these homeless people and be able to get their lives going, and they have a bed to sleep in instead of having to go on a, underneath a bridge or, behind someone's yard. I'm just, it's really hard. And it's basically when you're a couple. It's just like my husband, Michael Osborne. For one, he's a felon, and on the felonies, they don't help, and it's really, really stressful on these people. And to go against somebody just because they did a crime, well, you can't move in, you can't do this. So I just wish kindly you to help these people, because I've been there. And it's not a good feeling at all. So on my behalf, I wish you guys would help the homeless get housing. Thank you very much.
Again, there's one other opportunity to speak after the legislation. We're going to move on to ordinances on the first reading, 19-08.
Ordinance 19-08 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Koss, Mr. Frazier, an ordinance amending Chapter 618 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Newark, Ohio, regarding the causing serious physical harm to a companion animal.
19-08 will be held till May 6th for our next meeting. Next, we'll move on to resolutions on the second reading, 19-18.
Resolution 19-18 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Lang, Mr. Koss, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Frazier, and Mr. Labutus, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for providing the necessary labor, materials, and equipment for painting the water storage tank in the Stonewell Estates area.
You've heard the second reading of 19-18. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I can make a motion to adopt 19-18.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-18?
There's none.
Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Koss.
Yes. 19-18 passes 9-0. Next on the second reading, we have 19-20.
Resolution 19-20 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Lang, Mr. Kost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, Mr. Labutus, A resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for funding from the United States Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance under the Bulletproof Vest Program, Partnership Grant Program.
You've heard the second reading of 19-20. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-20.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-20? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cox?
Yes. 19-20 passes 9-0. Next on the second reading, we have 19-21.
Resolution 19-21 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Lang, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, Mr. Labutus. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for various construction projects.
You've heard the second reading of 19-21. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 19-21.
Motion by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 19-21? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cox?
Yes. 19-21 passes 9-0. Next on the second reading, we have 19-23.
Resolution 19-23 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Lang, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, and Mr. Labutus. A resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Department of Transportation for the 2019 Transportation Alternatives Program to partially fund one future project.
You've heard the second reading of 19-23. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 19-23.
Motion by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-23? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cox?
Yes.
19-23 passes 9-0. Finally, on the second reading, we have 19-24.
Resolution 19-24 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Lang, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, and Mr. Labutus, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 19-24. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-24.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-24? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes.
19-24 passes 9-0. Next, resolutions on the first reading, 19-25.
Resolution 19-25 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Lang, Mr. Cost, Mr. Labutus, Mr. Rath, and Mr. Frazier, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
19-25.
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on Resolution 19-25.
Motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. These need to be expedited. We have some payouts in which we need to get employees their payout dollars immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Autumn, please call the roll, waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Abstain.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes.
2-day reading rule is waived. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-25.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any other discussion on 19-25? Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Abstain.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes.
19-25 passes 8-0, 1 abstention. Next, we have 19-26.
Resolution 19-26 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Labutus, Mr. Lang, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to participate in the ODOT winter contract for road salt and declaring an emergency.
19-26 is on its first reading, but is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 19-26.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath. Second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 19-26?
Mr. President, we're declaring an emergency on this in order to be able to participate with the state. Unfortunately, ODOT is slow at giving us notification of that as usual. So we need to declare an emergency to be able to participate on their timing.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Anyone else? That second was by Mr. Cost, by the way. I moved up there. Please call the roll vote. Sorry.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
19-26 passes 9-0. Next, we have 19-27 on the first reading.
Resolution 19-27 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Labutus, Mr. Frazier, and Mr. Lang. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark, Ohio to negotiate and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for professional engineering services in connection with the design and construction of an ultraviolet disinfection system upgrade project pursuant to Article 10.02D of the Charter of the City of Newark. This contract for professional services does not require competitive bidding.
19-27 will be held until our next meeting on May 6th. Next, we have 19-28.
Resolution 19-28 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Labutus, Mr. Frazier, and Mr. Lang. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for equipment installation for SCADA system upgrade at water treatment plants.
19-28 will be held at our next meeting for May 6th. And next on the first reading, we have 19-29.
Resolution 19-29 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Labutus, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, and Mr. Lang. A resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
And 19-29 will be held at our next meeting May 6th. And finally this evening, we have 19-30.
Resolution 19-30 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Frazier, Mr. Lang. A resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to accept bids and sell certain surplus personal property now owned by the City of Newark, Ohio, and declaring that such property is no longer needed for any municipal purpose and declaring an emergency.
19-30 is on its first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
make a motion to adopt 19-30.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-30?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
we are declaring an emergency on this because we need to advertise the sale. In order to meet the applicant's deadlines, we need to have this passed as an emergency.
Mr. Rath. Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus? Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes.
19-30 passes 9-0. And that concludes our legislation this evening. We appreciate you paying attention. Thank you. We have one more opportunity for comments from citizens. That's now. The same rules apply. Again, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. We're going to start with this section over here. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand. Ma'am? Anyone else over here on this side like to speak? Raise your hand now.
Rochelle Bolin-Smith, 237 Violet Court. I was rather excited when I saw something in the notes earlier today about a grant that you were applying for nature preserve, I guess. I'm not sure what it's about. But I was thinking about the homeless situation, which I considered an emergency that can't wait. And it was wondering whether something like that could be tied to something that allows for tent city usage. For instance, by the Evans Pond where there's fishing and that sort of thing, to have tent facilities where I think there already is some bathroom facilities, and putting some money into that. So I wish you would address it, and thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone, no one else on this side? Anyone else? Anyone that hasn't spoke yet? First time, ma'am, come on up. Then we'll start on the second round.
Thank you. I'm Maria Leon Garcia, fortunately living at 322 Central Avenue. I want to share my experience. In 2008, I decided to leave my husband and I moved into New Beginnings, the shelter for battered women. I lived there with my 3 children, my son who was 6, my daughters who were 3 and 1. I was there for 5 weeks, and then they took me to the Coalition for Housing, and they took me. I completed the program for 2 years. Now, throughout this process, I met a lot of women who were in my situation. All of us have very similar stories. My point is, when people say, why doesn't she leave her abuser? I want you to think, I challenge everybody in this room to put yourselves in a situation when you have children, little children, and you have nowhere to go because you cannot afford anywhere. Even if you have a job, if it's minimum wage, I'm pretty sure nobody can afford it. Afford 1-room apartment. I completed the program at the Coalition for Housing, but I struggled a lot. I had to move in with a boyfriend who, in the end, I had to leave, but it was a very difficult situation, mainly for my children. So, if you can consider any way to make affordable housing more accessible, that will help a lot of women get out of the vicious cycle of domestic violence. And men, I know that. And I support the encampment too. I think that will be an option for a lot of people and a lot of women. So thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am. Anyone else on this side? Last chance. Put your hand up now. Okay. Go ahead.
I want housing again on behalf the ones that are very sick, like for instance, I'm like very sick, and you wouldn't want to be on the streets or anything when you're not feeling good, sick, you need medication, and I mean it's no good, and just help the ones that are sick too. I mean, it's just like, if you're sick, you just don't want to go and lay under a bridge or like I said, laying on grass or anything. I mean, you want to be in your home and be able to get yourself well in a nice, comfortable bed. And I just wanted to put that.
Give me your name and address again.
Tina Osborne, 1643 Churchill Down Road, Apartment B.
Thank you. All right, this side over here. Just these two. Anybody else want to speak? Put your hand up now. Okay, ma'am.
Donna Gibson, 1100 Thornwood Drive. I would in no way be disrespectful to any of you, because I know several of you. But I have to ask this question. We've seen these council meetings where like the tents are being destroyed and no one seems to know anything about it. My confusion is if I'm sitting in that seat and I'm being treated like a mushroom by somebody higher up who won't tell me what's going on, I need to vacate that seat and give it to somebody who does care. So I'm going to go under the assumption, since No one seems to know about it, including the mayor, and we have the law director sitting there. So I'm assuming that there's somebody even higher than that who is making decisions that they are treating you guys as if you don't matter to tell those decisions to. I mean, how can you do your jobs and help the people in the community when you're not told what's happening? And I'm trying to help people and answer questions, and I have no idea who to tell them to come to. I can't tell them to come to any of you guys. I can't, because you don't seem to know what's happening or nobody's telling you. I can't go and tell them to talk to the mayor, because apparently the mayor doesn't realize what's going on. Somebody's doing whatever and treating you guys like puppets. I would be offended if I was sitting in that seat and I felt like somebody pay grade above me was treating me like a puppet. What I'm asking you guys to do is to please start asking questions. If you hear about stuff like this happening, knock on that door. Most people who know me and know me in the community, I'll knock until you answer the door. I'm not going to leave. You're not going to go home until you talk to me. So I think it's important that you guys start asking those questions. Who's doing that? Who okayed these camps being torn down? It sure wasn't the railroad. We all know that's a fact now. So who is not telling you guys the stuff that's happening in your city? Who's doing that? Who's making those decisions? So I ask you to start asking those questions and saying, quit treating me like a mushroom. I'm doing a job here and I have people to answer to. So you tell me who's doing this and let us all get together and take care of the city. Thank you.
This is not a question and answer period with council. This is a time for your opinion. That's why nobody has really said anything. I think a lot of folks up here have a pretty good idea. There's a time for miscellaneous that comes up next for council. Excuse me? Ma'am?
Thank you once again. My name is Tanya Cooper. I live at 260 North 5th Street in Newark, Ohio. And I just want to bring a little something to your attention. I'm sure all of you have heard of Maslow's theory of hierarchy of needs. When we're talking about the homeless people, they deserve shelter. They need food. They need shelter. They need a place to bathe. And if we don't give them that, how can we get them to go to the top of the ladder? They can't reach the top of that ladder if they can't miss these brackets first. This has to come first, not this. This has to come first. And once we get them there and start helping them, they'll get to the top. And you'll see a change in the people. But we have to be willing to accept the fact that this community is falling apart at the rims. And we have to pull together and say we want answers. And the government and the people that are paying our budgets need to look at our little town and stop looking at the bigger cities. Because they got it too, and they're getting paid to get put up cities for homeless. What's wrong with us? We're all out here working our butts off, trying to help these people, only to run up against a barrier every time. And it's time that we all come together as a community and as a group of organizers and say, we're going to do something. Let's stand up and do what we need to do. Let's give these people a home. Let's be there for them when they need somebody. Because someday you might need them. And what are you going to do when they turn their back on you? It's time to look at the true factor here. Get out and talk to these people. You all say, oh, well, they're homeless because of this and they're homeless because of that. Have you ever talked to a homeless person? 90% of people in this community will say, oh, no, they're dirty. They're drug addicts. Talk to the person. They may not become homeless overnight. Just like we said earlier, it could be a tornado, a flood, a fire, and all of a sudden they're on the street. They lose their job. They can't afford the rent. The rent is sky high in this town. I live in a 3-bedroom house. It's $600 a month, plus all my utilities, and I get $1,300 a month in disability. Now you tell me how I'm supposed to make it on that. I go get food stamps. I get $15 a month to live on. Now you tell me how me and my husband are supposed to live on $1,500 a month, or $15 a month in food stamps. If you can tell me how to settle that problem, I'll gladly take your answer. And if you need to know about Maslow's theory, I have information at the website so you can go home and look at it. Thank you.
Everett McKee, 255 Ups and Downs Road, also the videographer for these meetings. I'd just like to make it known to everybody here that these meetings are all public information. You can get to them on YouTube, and you can get to them through the Newark City website. All you do is go to the Newark City website, click on Government, City Council, and there's a link to all several hundred videos that I've taken here since about 2014. So they're available, free for anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Any city officials this evening? Director Vaughn. While you're coming up, is the gentleman who was sitting right back there in the blue shirt and the blue hat still here? Because he had his hand up first time and I completely let it go. I'm sorry. Okay.
He addressed me directly. He had a piece of paper for me to read. So let me address the homeless camp cleanups. I am Steve Baum, Director of Public Safety. I'm civilian oversight for police, fire, and property maintenance. So everybody on council got a copy of the trespass affidavit signed by the railroad to remove persons trespassing on their property. I'm aware of 3 camp cleanups. One occurred off of Swans Road in the county. That was the sheriff's department. I'm aware of 2 inside the city of Newark. One happened last week, and one is probably what most people are referring to. So the police department gets a complaint. They investigate an assault complaint. They become aware of a camp cleanup, or a camp. They described it as 4,000 square feet of trash. You all have a copy of that report. So, city workers, after the people who lived in this camp were told they were trespassing and given time to leave and take their belongings, came in and cleaned up the trash. They took out 3 dump truck loads of trash from this campsite. The second camp was next to Modern Welding. It was state property maintained by the city. We got a complaint from Modern Welding of both their fence being cut and an unattended fire in this camp. So the camp is next to woods. They're owned by the Ohio Historical Society, which contain Indian mounds. So because we had a complaint from Modern Welding and the protection of the mounds, the police department responded, told the 2 men living in the camp that they had 24 hours to leave. Anything they left behind would be disposed of by the city. So 24 hours later, they came back with city workers. They removed 26 bags of trash, mattresses, and disposed of it. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was cited. In the first camp, somebody was arrested on a warrant, child support warrant. Nothing we can do about that. You get an order to appear from the judge, you effect the warrant, arrest. But there was somebody at the first site with a vehicle, it's in the report I sent you all, told them he'd take them anywhere they wanted to go. But we have a signed affidavit for trespassing from the railroad, which is the same instance that happened off of Swans Road. People living next to the tracks, people in the neighborhood had stuff come up missing. They called the sheriff's department and said, look, it's okay as long as I don't have my stuff being stolen. Once my stuff came up missing, I'd like you to remove them. They were aware of a trespass affidavit, but the compassion that the police department tries to show the homeless is that unless they get a complaint, they try not to address it. They leave them in peace. Once laws start to be broken or a business feels their business is threatened by an unattended fire, they feel like they have to address the issue, which is exactly what happened. So I've started sending you reports whenever this happens. I will continue to do so. You'll be aware of every person that we relocate that is living in a tent.
You're sending reports and photos.
Reports and photos. Yes. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Any other city officials? Honorable Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Thank you, Director Sassen. Mayor Hall.
I will pass too.
Mr. Fennell.
I would like to thank everybody who came out and spoke tonight. I think that we heard some incredible stories that really brought a human face to people experiencing homelessness and those who are experiencing it currently or have in the past. And I know that cannot be easy to come up in front of a group of strangers and tell some of your hardest, most heart-wrenching stories. And I sincerely appreciate you coming forth and doing that. I know there's a lot of people in this room who are also on the front lines out there working to help people experiencing homelessness with as much time and energy that they have, and I also appreciate what you do. It's clear that homelessness is a problem in our city. I don't know what the answer is, but I appreciate that you continue bringing this idea to light and making sure that we can work together to make this happen, to find a solution. With that, I will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Mr. Frazier?
Mr. President, thank you guys for coming out tonight. Helena, thank you for your message. One of the big things about the CRA expansion is for property owners to be incentivized to stay in their house, make improvements, improve the quality of housing throughout an entire neighborhood. So it's not meant for just gentrification, as we frequently say, but what it's intended for is property owners being invested, provided tax credits that go through an approval process with the city in order for them to do. This was an expansion that we did to try to improve economically distressed areas and improve the housing stock throughout the areas in which they are impacted. When it comes to your drive and your passion with this, I'm really excited for your participation, and if you want to learn more about opportunities that we have with the city to improve neighborhoods and keep people in their houses, I would love to talk to you about that. When it comes to Mitchell, thank you for coming as well. I like to work with numbers and to hear the numbers, and your personal story, it really helped me to understand. And with the different programs, especially with Maria, to see the programs that are in action that actually help people get on a path and provide a safe environment. And I think that what we see a lot in the city of Newark is kind of a disconjointed safety net, where we have different people working on different programs trying to tackle the same issue. When we have different organizations providing food on the same days, but some days no days, I think better coordination is ultimately what we need to do. When it comes to our involvement in the city and in the community, I try to do my part. And so on 4/24, there's a Newark NAS homeless outreach. I still owe the Newark Homeless Coalition a visit on Saturday as well, and to provide a donation in order to make that happen. And the other thing that I'm most excited about is an organization called miraclemessages.org. They record homeless people's stories, and then you're able to find relatives and family members that have been out of touch for some 20 and 30 years in order to get them in touch with their support network and get people that are often not seen or heard of for years because of travel or relocation or heartache. And so this is a very difficult issue because it in fact impacts the lives of some of often forgotten and people without a lot of options. And so I look forward to the challenge. Some of the other things that are going on in the city is the HHCA has a cleanup day on 4/27 for the downtown Newark area, a park work day, North Street Park on 5/4, and the community yard sales coming up on 5/11 on the yard for the HHCA yard sale. But when it comes to this issue, thank you for your advocacy, thank you for coming, and I know that everybody up here is looking to help in whatever way that we can. And with that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Hall?
Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming and speaking tonight as well. I don't know what the solution is, but we've got to start somewhere. So I also want to thank Director Baum for straightening out some issues over the past couple of weeks, giving us some more details. I hope things can change for us. So thank you again. That'll pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Lang?
Yeah, so again, I appreciate everyone who came tonight. You're asking a lot of very difficult questions, and I think at times there's this kind of us versus them attitude that, hey, you're down there, we're up here. We're all people too. If we had answers, if I had the answer, I think I'd be a lot more than just a lowly city councilman. These are really hard questions, and I think there's a number of us who are trying, who are working, who are going out into the community and meeting with people to try to get a better understanding of the issues and try to figure out the solutions. The solutions I heard tonight, somebody asked the question, how do you make affordable housing more accessible? Again, that's a really hard question. I don't know the answer, but if anybody has any ideas, I'm always willing to listen. A tent city, I'd like to hear more about how you implement that in a way that protects the people that live there, protects the people that live near there, and in a way that doesn't create an attractive nuisance where you're getting people that come in from outside the community and then become a further burden on our community. I would like to thank Director Baum. I asked him to come and address some of the issues, try to clear it up. Want to make sure everybody has the two police reports that were referenced. One is 2019-000-5334, and the other one from more recently is 2019-0000-9392. But I'm sure if you go to the window at the police station, ask for the reports, the folks there will be able to get those for you. So again, thank you everybody who came tonight, and if anybody has solutions they want to talk to me about, I'm always open. Happy to listen. With that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Marmee?
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to call a Finance Committee meeting. I too want to thank everybody for sharing the information that you have. I know that it is a difficult situation. Some things our hands are tied as far as city involvement. We have to worry about the safety of citizens. The same restraints that some of you indicate that some of the organizations have placed, the city would probably have to put similar constraints just to make sure that the safety of those that are around. I do know, and I also want to share, that the city does already support a lot of this and a number of the different things that were mentioned this evening. The way that we do that is we have community development block grant money, and we provide money and funds to those organizations, thousands of dollars annually. The Licking County Coalition for Housing, St. Vincent, those were two that I heard that stood out in my mind because I'm heavily involved when that comes through in the passage of that. Director Malter and his department, he makes sure that those funds get allocated to the appropriate service agencies that really can help benefit those in our community that are down or that need a little bit of a boost to get back to where they need to, up on that hierarchy of needs. So it isn't that we're not doing anything, it's that we're trying to do as much as we can, and we need viable solutions. And it's difficult because of the constraints that are put on us. A tent city, in order for everybody to be safe if something like that were to happen, and also to be able to put that in the location. And then I even heard one of the solutions was that we have officers there or an officer there. Well, our city services are already pretty strained the way that they are, so we have to be, if a higher priority comes along, then they have to react to that if an officer is on duty. And it could be a domestic violence situation, it could be any kind of a situation that they have to react to. So it isn't like they could provide 24/7. So, but again, we can work through some of these things. The organizations that are already in place, I think, like Mr. Frazier's indicated, there needs to be a little bit more collaboration and communication to make sure that those agencies are working together and not against each other. And I don't want to say against each other, they're not competing, but they're just not in fluid motion together. So, And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmy. Mr. Rath?
Thank you. I need to call a service committee meeting for May 6th. I want to thank everybody for coming. We've heard some great stories and some great ideas for suggestions and for solutions. And with every idea or suggestion or solution that's been brought up, it raises another 100 questions. So it's not something that just can be waived and say, let it be, or so, it's just not that simple. So it does raise a lot of other questions. Some other people have said it tonight, and I've said it up here before. We've got a lot of very caring people in Newark and a lot of great organizations that do a lot of things. Many of those organizations the city supports financially as well as other ways. But we really do need to get a coordinated effort. I've said that before, I'll say it again. We've got so many people going in so many different directions and so much energy and resources being spent, and I got to believe that there would be there's got to be a much more efficient way to spend those resources and that energy to a more coordinated effort. I mean, I don't want to say that to stifle what we are doing or what you guys are doing, because that's great, but there definitely needs to be a more coordinated effort. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Mr. Blake?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think many times, people come to city council meetings to express themselves, to express the work, the advocacy work that you're doing in the community, which I thank you for that. To express the sort of the values of this is what you're seeing. Many of us may not see the experiences that you're having and working with different segments of our population, our community. And so people come to council as a public meeting, as a forum to express these things. And I think that, now we've had quite a few different meetings in this chamber talking about this issue, but you're seeing on a weekly, daily basis a need for urgency, a need for some action, a need for someone to move forward with convening. I don't necessarily believe that city government needs to expend dollars, but a city government can be a leader in convening and bringing groups and organizations together and being able to facilitate those conversations so that things are coordinated better. Various different organizations have various different resources, and if things are centralized and brought together, then hopefully we can pull all those resources. That's been done in Licking County and Newark many times in the past, and that's something we need to bring some urgency to in doing this. Other cities our size and other cities in even in Central Ohio have done tent cities. It's not an unreasonable request. I think it's something that it was mentioned, and I know I've had conversations with many of you out in the audience, and we have property, but we need someone to bring some urgency to things so that things can be moving along. And not just a matter of you're wanting to spend a Monday night at City Hall, but you're wanting to get things done so the people you serve, either on every Saturday or every day that you're working with folks, something can be done. These are people that are living out in the elements, and we have the luxury of going home and getting into our beds. Many of these people have the luxury of what? Being under a tree, being under a bridge, where we have to recognize this. These people have dignity and worth, and just waiting another 2 weeks or another month for another council meeting isn't the answer. So I hope that, I thank you, first and foremost, for your continued work and your continued advocacy of taking time to even to come to these types of meetings. But it's my hope that we can finally get some action. I mean, that's finally and ultimately what needs to be done. People need to speak up, and I don't view this as a us versus thing. Then this is just the venue at which you're able to utilize. I mean, the way we're sitting makes it seem like an us versus thing, but I really do believe that many of us do want to work together. And sometimes these council meetings make it seem like it's so structured that you can't really have decent conversation, dialogue. but it has to be beyond this room. And so I'm hoping that we can do that. And not just the grassroots groups. You know, what was it, a month ago, we had different grassroots groups come here, but there's social service agency directors. You know, Deb Dingus is doing some good work in trying to convene people, but I believe city government could do that as well. And so, you know, I thank you for continuing to be an advocate, continue pushing. And I just want to say, you know, I know the director is doing what he can, but I really don't want to be aware of every person being relocated. I'm hoping that we can find them an avenue of care, you know, so that they don't have to be relocated by the police. I mean, that's the ultimate thing. Is hopefully that police intervention is something of getting into an avenue of care, not necessarily just destruction. But you know, I thank you for coming tonight, and you know, hopefully we can see some urgency coming from this once again. A room full of people talking about this issue, and hopefully it can continue beyond tonight and get some urgency done. With that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Buck?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I too would like to thank everyone for coming in this evening. And I think I said this at the last meeting. I would encourage, you know, everyone here that knows somebody in need of emergency housing to coordinate with the Deb Techmeyer, the Housing Coalition. They do have emergency funding available. They do have emergency housing available, and they also have you know, open vouchers for veterans that are in need, and they also will help coordinate with the VA over on Buckeye Avenue, you know, for veterans. So there is a lot of different avenues available there. So I would encourage. I mean, they can really step forward and help in a lot of ways that the city government can. So I would encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with that agency. With that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Mr. Cost?
Obviously, homelessness is a huge issue for Newark, for a lot of cities, most cities. I do want to say, though, I don't feel like an uninformed puppet sitting here. Not at all. I think we are kept informed. I think what you have here is a group of people who truly care about this community. We wouldn't be here if we didn't care about this community. It's the only reason we're here. And the city does have a role to play. The city has a role to play, as people were saying, in trying to help coordinate not only the groups that are out working, but the individuals as well. I think there is a true effort. I think there needs to be a great deal more. But you have a group of people here that really care and want to help, and we're going to do anything we can to help. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. I'd just like to add my thanks. I appreciate you coming in. I always appreciate hearing your opinions. You may not think so, but there are discussions going on. It may not be as quick as you want, or the solutions may not be the solution that you want, but there are discussions going on, and folks are working on it. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer than that, but that's the best I can do right at this point in time. And I would agree with Mr. Cost. Now, I don't think we're puppets up here. We do have a pretty good idea what's going on. I think Director Baum stated pretty well what happened with the camps. It wasn't just the city went out and just said, hey, let's just go ahead and destroy these camps and not tell anybody or do anything about it. I think it was done because it had to be done. And with that, again, we appreciate you coming at any time. Our next meeting is May the 6th. The committees will start at 5:45. Our full council will start at 7. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Cost. Second by Mr. Lang. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned.